Dr. Elliot Vance had never imagined that a single day of routine work could turn into one of the strangest, most stressful experiences of his life. The morning on Clyra Prime had begun like any other. Bright, slightly humid, with the soft hum of alien energy resonating through the colony's biodomes. Elliot adjusted his lab coat and checked the instruments around the small medical station, where he cared for alien lifeforms brought in for study. Today's assignment was simple, or so he thought. A small creature, roughly the size of a house cat but covered in luminous, translucent scales, had a minor skin irritation. His task was to apply a special ointment developed for their species. Easy enough, right? Elliot smiled nervously to himself. Recalling his training back on Earth, how complicated could applying ointment be? The creature, which the colony had named Lumina, blinked its large, opalescent eyes at him. The moment Elliot's fingers touched the tiny patch of irritated skin, Lumina shivered, and something unexpected happened. A soft glow erupted from its body, filling the room with a gentle, pulsing light. Elliot froze. He hadn't expected this, and then, the impossible occurred. The glow solidified into shapes, moving images, like a hologram projected in midair. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. The images weren't random, they were scenes, and these scenes weren't just Lumina's experiences. They were the lives of every member of the alien colony. He saw moments of joy, fear, celebration, and secrets, entire ceremonies, private conversations, discoveries that had never been shared outside the colony. Elliot stepped back, panicking. This can't be real. I only applied ointment. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Every holographic image seemed to react to his presence, adjusting and flickering as if aware of him. And then he heard her voice. She saw everything. Now, take responsibility. Elliot spun around. There, standing near the glowing projection, was Lyra. She was one of the alien dignitaries, elegant and serene, with flowing silver patterns running across her skin. Her eyes glowed faintly in sync with the images. Elliot gulped, feeling more guilty than he had in his entire life. I only applied ointment, he stammered, waving at Lumina nervously. I didn't mean to. I didn't see anything. Lyra's expression was calm, almost like she had expected this reaction. She stepped closer, her movements smooth and measured. Seeing is not the same as intending, Elliot Vance, she said, her voice melodic and clear. Yet now that you have seen, you cannot pretend you did not. Responsibility comes with awareness. You understand that, do you not? Elliot swallowed hard. He wanted to explain that he had not tried to intrude, that he had merely touched a creature needing care. But the images floated between them, undeniable and vivid, showing him the lives of a civilization he barely understood. He nodded slowly. I think I understand, he said, even though his mind felt like it was spinning too fast. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Lyra's glow seemed to brighten as she regarded him. That is what you must learn, Elliot. Responsibility is not always about action. Sometimes, it is about understanding. Sometimes, it is about care. You were chosen not by mistake, but because humans have a certain quality. A quality we hope will guide the knowledge entrusted to you. Elliot's panic didn't subside, but a spark of curiosity replaced part of it. Humans had always been remarkable in their adaptability, their creativity, and their empathy. And now, somehow, those traits had made him the observer of this civilization's most private moments. Could he really help them? Could he even manage to understand everything he had seen? The holographic images flickered again, showing the colony's history. Celebrations of growth, new creatures being born, scientists discovering innovations, and elders passing knowledge to the next generation. Elliot noticed small patterns, small gestures of care that reminded him of human behavior in its simplest form. Helping others, cooperating, creating art. He had always believed humans were unique, but now he saw how universality of care transcended species. Why me? Elliot asked, voice low. Why humans? Lyra tilted her head. Because humans see responsibility differently. You do not take it lightly, even when it is difficult. And when knowledge appears, you do not destroy it. You preserve it. You learn from it. That is what we need. Elliot's mind tried to process this. Preserve it. Learn from it. These weren't instructions for a lab test. They were a challenge. A task larger than anything he had imagined. And somehow, it was terrifying. Lumina shifted slightly, nudging against his leg. The creature's light pulsed rhythmically, almost as if offering reassurance. Elliot bent down and gently patted its side. Okay, he whispered. I'll try. I'll do what I can. Lyra's smile was faint, but there was approval in her glowing eyes. Good. Let this be the beginning of your understanding. Tomorrow, you will start by learning the simple care that preserves knowledge. Elliot nodded again. He had no idea what that meant yet, but the first step was clear. Observe, learn, and act thoughtfully. He glanced at the holographic images, feeling the weight of awareness settle over him. Responsibility was no longer abstract, it was real, and it started with him. As he left the small medical station, Elliot paused to look back at Lumina, who blinked slowly, its glow softening. For a brief moment, he felt a connection, as though the tiny creature understood both his fear and his determination. The world outside the biodome seemed suddenly larger, stranger, and more alive than he had ever imagined. Elliot spent the night reviewing what he had seen, taking careful notes about Lumina's health and the colony's ecosystem. Even in sleep, his mind replayed flashes of memory from the holographic projection. He didn't feel scared anymore, he felt a deep sense of purpose. Somehow, humans had been trusted with something extraordinary, and he could not let them or himself fail. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the translucent dome of Clyra Prime, painting the room in soft, shimmering colors. Elliot took a deep breath and prepared for the lessons ahead. Lyra had promised guidance, and he was ready to listen. He did not yet know the full scope of responsibility, but he had taken the first step, to care. And in that moment, Elliot realized that sometimes, being human was not about conquering or controlling. It was about seeing, understanding, and acting with thoughtfulness, patience, and kindness. The world, and perhaps the universe, was watching, and he was ready to rise to the challenge. Elliot woke early, the soft light of Clyra Prime's twin suns spilling into the biodome. He had barely slept, his mind still swirling with images of the holographic memories he had accidentally witnessed. The responsibility Lyra had spoken about weighed on him like a gentle, pressing gravity. It wasn't a threat, but a call to action one he couldn't ignore. He quickly dressed and went to the small common area where Lyra had said she would meet him. As he approached, he noticed the colony beginning its morning routines. The creatures moved gracefully, their translucent wings shimmering in the sunlight, while the plants pulsed softly with bioluminescent light. Everything on Clyra Prime seemed alive, not just with motion but with a subtle intelligence. Lyra was waiting near a collection of living specimens. She greeted him with a nod. "Good morning, Elliot. Are you ready to begin?" Elliot swallowed and nodded. I think so." Lyra led him to a section of the colony that Elliot had never seen. The area was a garden of sorts, filled with plants and creatures that glowed in a kaleidoscope of colors. Some were tiny, hovering insects that emitted soft musical tones, while others were larger, with petals that seemed to ripple with emotion. Elliot's eyes widened as he realized that every living thing here was connected in ways he could not yet understand. "This is where you will begin," Lyra said. "Responsibility is not always about great acts. Sometimes, it is the small, careful attention to detail that preserves life, knowledge, and culture. Today, you will learn to care." Elliot nodded again, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. He had applied ointment to Lumina before, but this was different. He would be interacting with an entire ecosystem, and his actions would have consequences. He took a deep breath and prepared himself. The first lesson was simple, yet it required patience, observing without interfering. Lyra guided him to a cluster of bioluminescent plants. "Watch them," she instructed. "See how they respond to light, touch, and sound. Do not disturb them, only observe and record." Elliot knelt down and carefully examined the plants. Their petals opened and closed in gentle rhythms, and tiny spores floated around them like glitter. He noticed subtle patterns. Some plants responded to the hum of the colony's energy, while others seemed to react to the movement of nearby creatures. He scribbled notes, amazed at the level of detail. After several hours, Lyra introduced the next task: interacting without harm. Elliot was handed a small creature, a delicate, winged being, no larger than his hand. Its wings shimmered in shades of blue and silver, and its eyes reflected curiosity and trust. "Apply the ointment, as you did with Lumina," Lyra instructed. "But remember, this is more than medicine. Your touch carries intention. Respect and gentleness are your tools." Elliot's hands shook slightly as he approached the creature. He remembered his panic from the previous day and took a deep breath. Carefully, he applied the ointment, noticing how the creature's wings fluttered in response. It was not fear, but understanding, a recognition that he meant no harm. Lyra observed silently, then nodded. "Well done. You see, Elliot, care is an action, but also a language. Even without words, you communicate trust and respect." The day passed in a series of similar exercises. Elliot cleaned delicate spores from plants, guided tiny creatures back to safe areas, and even helped a group of bioluminescent vines untangle from each other. Each action required attention, patience, and thoughtfulness. And with each success, Elliot felt a growing sense of confidence. He was learning to act responsibly, not because anyone forced him, but because he wanted to. Around midday, Lyra led him to a quiet clearing where a small pool reflected the twin suns. The water shimmered with soft, rainbow-like ripples. "Now, you will learn about observation and memory," she said. "This pool reflects the colony's energy patterns. Watch carefully, and you will see not only the present but traces of the past." Elliot leaned over the pool, mesmerized. Slowly, the water began to ripple, forming faint, glowing images, memories of creatures that had lived here long ago. He saw tiny winged beings learning to fly, plants growing and intertwining, and the colony's elders teaching new generations. Elliot realized that Clyra Prime was not just alive. It was a living archive. Every action mattered. Every choice could preserve or disrupt knowledge. "You see now," Lyra said softly, "why it is dangerous to act carelessly, and also why humans are valuable. You observe, you learn, and you act with thought. That is rare." Elliot nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Humans were indeed curious, careful, and capable of empathy. He felt pride in his species in a way he had never experienced. He was beginning to understand why he had been chosen. As the sun began to lower, Elliot helped Lyra guide a group of creatures to shelter for the night. He watched as tiny winged beings nestled in the folds of glowing plants, humming softly. Even the smallest acts of care seemed to ripple through the colony, creating harmony and trust. Lyra turned to him as the last creatures settled. "You are learning, Elliot. Not perfectly, but genuinely. That is enough for now. Tomorrow, you will begin to understand how to help the colony preserve not only its life, but its history." Elliot felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The work was far from over, but he no longer felt helpless or panicked. He was beginning to see responsibility not as a burden, but as an opportunity, a chance to connect, learn, and contribute. Later, back in his quarters, Elliot reflected on the day. He thought of Lumina and the glowing images he had seen yesterday. He realized that responsibility was not about avoiding mistakes, it was about choosing to act thoughtfully and with care. Every small action mattered. Every moment of attention, every gentle touch, Every observation contributed to the preservation of life and knowledge. He also realized something else. Humans had something unique to offer. Their ability to think creatively, to adapt to new environments, and to act ethically in unexpected situations made them valuable in ways other species might not fully understand. Elliot felt a surge of pride and determination. As he drifted off to sleep, Elliot promised himself that he would continue to learn, to observe, and to care. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that humans could be responsible stewards of alien life. The stars outside the dome twinkled softly, and Elliot felt a quiet connection to the universe. For the first time, he understood that being human was not about domination or control. It was about empathy, attention, and the willingness to act thoughtfully. And in that understanding lay the true meaning of responsibility. The next morning, Elliot woke before the first light of Clyra Prime's twin suns. The biodome was quiet, filled with soft humming from the colony's creatures and glowing plants. Elliot felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. Lyra had promised that today he would begin a deeper lesson, one that went beyond care and observation. Today, he would learn about preservation. When he met Lyra, she led him to a secluded area of the colony that Elliot had never visited. The path was lined with plants whose leaves shimmered like glass, and the air smelled faintly sweet, like a mixture of flowers and fresh rain. "This is the archive," Lyra explained. "It is not only a record of life, but a memory of our civilization. Only those entrusted with care may enter." Elliot's heart beat faster. He remembered the holographic images from Lumina yesterday, the private moments, the celebrations, and the knowledge of the colony. Could it be that all of this was stored here? "Come," Lyra said, leading him to a gently glowing entrance concealed behind a curtain of bioluminescent vines. Elliot stepped through, and he gasped. Inside was a hall of soft light, with walls that pulsed like living skin. The archive was vast, far larger than the entrance suggested, filled with shimmering projections, floating symbols, and holographic images that moved gracefully through the air. "This," Lyra said, "is where we store knowledge. History, culture, discoveries, and memories of every generation. It is delicate, and it is precious. Humans who have seen our lives must understand how to help preserve it." Elliot felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He had never encountered anything like this, even in the most advanced human technology. Every image in the archive seemed alive, almost breathing, carrying the emotion and energy of the beings it represented. Lyra guided him to a small section, where the holograms depicted daily life, creatures learning to fly, young ones discovering plants, elders teaching rituals. "Observe, Elliot. See the patterns. Each life, each act, is connected. What you do outside this room affects what is preserved here." Elliot watched carefully. He noticed details he had missed before, the gentle way older creatures nudged younger ones, the subtle dances of pollination between plants, the quiet humming of energy flowing through the colony. Everything was connected, fragile, and beautiful. "You are ready for the next lesson," Lyra said. "Not all knowledge survives by itself. Some must be actively preserved." She touched a floating symbol, and a new projection appeared, a section of the archive showing a rare species of plant and the creatures that depended on it. Their numbers had begun to decline due to small environmental changes. Elliot's stomach tightened. He understood the stakes. Even small mistakes in care could ripple outward, affecting the entire colony. "What should I do?" he asked. "Learn their needs, observe, and act gently. Use your hands, your mind, and your heart. Humans have a remarkable ability to notice small patterns, to adapt, and to act responsibly. That is why you are here." Elliot spent hours in the archive, following instructions from Lyra. He gently touched the projections, and each one responded to his attention. When he observed a plant closely, the projection clarified details about sunlight, water flow, and energy patterns. When he noticed a creature's subtle movements, the hologram expanded, showing its history and connections. He realized that preservation was not just about keeping things the same, it was about understanding, supporting, and guiding growth without interference. It was about trust, care, and thoughtfulness. And humans, with their attention to detail and adaptability, were surprisingly good at this. By mid-afternoon, Lyra introduced Elliot to a more complex task. She led him to a section showing a network of vines and roots that connected much of the colony. These vines carry memory through the colony, she explained. If they become tangled or damaged, knowledge can be lost. Your task is to untangle and guide them gently. Elliot knelt and studied the network. At first, it seemed impossible. The roots twisted in intricate patterns, some fragile, some resilient. He remembered Lyra's words. Observe first, act gently, and use thoughtfulness. Slowly, he began to work. His fingers traced the soft edges of the roots, following the natural flow. He paused when a tangle was too complex, letting the network guide him. Hours passed, and Elliot's confidence grew. The roots responded to his care, shifting and glowing with renewed energy. He realized that his actions, however small, had real effects. He had moved from panic to purpose. During a short break, Elliot sat near a pool of reflective liquid, thinking about the archive. The images he had seen reminded him of human life curiosity, care, creativity. He smiled, realizing that humans were capable of preserving and protecting knowledge in ways the colony had not fully expected. This was not about strength or power. It was about mindfulness and dedication. Lyra approached and sat beside him. You are learning quickly, she said. You see patterns, understand connections, and act without causing harm. These are rare qualities. Even among our own kind, few can preserve knowledge so gently. Elliot felt a warmth of pride. He had come to Clyra Prime unsure of his abilities. But now he understood something important. Humans could contribute in ways that mattered deeply. It was not about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about responsibility, awareness, and care. Tomorrow, Lyra continued, you will begin working directly with living memories, experiences of the colony's elders, preserved in the archive. You will learn how to carry knowledge forward, so that it may survive for generations. Elliot's mind raced. He had been nervous about applying ointment yesterday, overwhelmed by what he had accidentally seen. But now, with guidance and experience, he felt ready to take on something far greater. He realized that every action, no matter how small, could contribute to the survival of life, history, and culture. As the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the biodome, Elliot helped Lyra guide more creatures back to their resting areas. The colony moved with harmony, each creature, plant, and projection glowing softly in the twilight. Elliot felt a deep connection to everything around him. Before leaving the archive, Elliot paused to touch one of the central holograms. It depicted a vast garden filled with life, with vines and creatures intertwined in delicate balance. He felt the pulse of the archive through his fingertips, a gentle vibration of energy and memory. It was as if the colony itself recognized his efforts and accepted him as a caretaker. Walking back to his quarters, Elliot felt tired but fulfilled. He had begun to understand the weight of responsibility, not as a burden, but as a privilege. Humans had been chosen for their ability to act thoughtfully, to preserve knowledge, and to care for life without harming it. That trust was now his to honor. Lying in bed that night, Elliot reflected on the lessons of the day. Observation and gentle care were the first steps. Tomorrow, he would begin to carry knowledge forward, guiding the colony's wisdom into the future. He realized that this was what it meant to be human in the eyes of Clyra Prime. Not to dominate, but to understand, protect, and nurture. Outside, the stars shimmered faintly above the biodome. Elliot closed his eyes, feeling a quiet confidence. He had seen the fragility of life and the beauty of knowledge. He had begun to take responsibility not because he was forced to, but because he cared. And in that care lay the power to preserve a civilization, to learn, and to grow. Elliot drifted into sleep, knowing that he had taken the next step. The journey was far from over, but he was no longer just a human visitor. He was a guardian, a learner, and a steward. The archive, the colony, and its memories were now in his hands, and he was ready to honor the trust placed upon him. The morning on Clyra Prime was calm, but Elliot felt a nervous excitement in his chest. Yesterday, he had learned to observe and care, to gently preserve the colony's memories and life. Today, Lyra had promised, would be a step further, one that involved making decisions that could shape the colony's future. He met Lyra near the archive, where soft, glowing light spilled across the polished surfaces of the bioluminescent hall. "Elliot," she said, her voice calm, "you have done well. Observation and care are the first steps. Now it is time to understand how your actions influence the future. Responsibility is not only about what you preserve, but also about the choices you make to guide growth." Elliot swallowed, feeling a mix of excitement and worry. He had never made decisions of such importance. What if he made a mistake? But as he looked at Lyra, he realized that hesitation would not help. Humans had been chosen for their thoughtfulness, empathy, and creativity. He would try his best. Lyra led him to a section of the archive Elliot had never seen. It was a vast, open area filled with living projections of the colony's possible futures. Each projection showed how small actions could change outcomes over time. In some, the colony thrived, plants and creatures growing in harmony, while in others, small mistakes led to imbalance, lost knowledge, or weakened connections. "These are the choices you must consider," Lyra explained. "Not every path is obvious. Some decisions require patience, careful thought, and understanding of both life and memory. You must guide without forcing, nurture without controlling." Elliot stepped closer to one projection. It showed a delicate vine network that had begun to tangle. In one scenario, the vines slowly grew back into order on their own. In another, they became hopelessly intertwined, causing smaller plants and creatures to suffer. He understood immediately. The colony depended on guidance. Lyra handed him a small, glowing staff. "This will help you interact with the projections. You cannot control them directly, but you can guide them with care. Touch lightly, act thoughtfully, and watch the outcomes." Elliot took the staff, feeling a strange energy flowing through it. When he touched a projection, he could sense its energy, like the pulse of a heartbeat. He guided a vine gently, nudging it toward a more harmonious path. Slowly, the projection shifted. The smaller plants flourished, and the creatures moved with ease. Elliot felt a deep satisfaction. He had influenced the future without force, only by understanding and care. For hours, Elliot worked with different projections, balancing energy flows in the colony, helping creatures find safe paths, and guiding the growth of plants. Each choice required attention and patience. He realized that even small errors could ripple outward, but careful observation and thoughtful action could prevent disaster. At one point, a projection showed a young creature struggling to fly. Its wings were not yet strong enough, and the surrounding currents of energy threatened to push it into danger. Elliot hesitated. Should he intervene directly? Lyra's voice echoed in his mind. Guide without controlling. He breathed deeply and thought about the problem. Using the staff, he adjusted the energy currents gently, giving the creature just enough support to rise safely, while allowing it to flap its wings and learn. The projection shifted, and the young creature soared, gaining strength with every beat. Elliot smiled. This was not only preservation, it was teaching, guiding, and nurturing. After a long morning, Lyra guided Elliot to another section. Here, the projections were more complex, showing multiple generations of life interacting with one another. Some actions had consequences that appeared days, weeks, or even years later. Elliot realized that responsibility was not only about the present, it was about the future, about thinking ahead and anticipating the effects of every decision. "You are ready," Lyra said. "Tomorrow, You will begin to interact with real-life decisions in the colony. You will not only preserve memories, but you will shape the living future of Clyra Prime. Your choices will leave a legacy. Elliot felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The idea of leaving a legacy was enormous. But he also felt confidence. He had learned to observe, care, and guide. Now, it was time to apply what he had learned in a real, living environment. As the afternoon passed, Elliot practiced with increasingly complicated projections. He guided groups of creatures through tangled roots, adjusted energy flows in fragile ecosystems, and balanced the growth of plants so that sunlight and nutrients reached every part of the colony. He noticed patterns, small connections that humans might overlook, and used them to guide his actions. By evening, Elliot felt exhausted but fulfilled. He had begun to understand the delicate balance of life and knowledge on Clyra Prime. Responsibility, he realized, was not a punishment or a burden. It was a privilege, the chance to connect with life, to guide it, and to ensure that knowledge and culture survived for generations. Lyra approached him as the glowing suns dipped below the horizon. "Elliot, you have learned much," she said. "You are ready for tomorrow. Remember, every action matters. Every choice has meaning. You will guide, nurture, and shape the colony's living memory. And through that, you will leave a legacy not of power, but of care and wisdom." Elliot nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had come to Clyra Prime uncertain and panicked, worried about a simple ointment application. But now, he was ready to take on responsibility in a new way. He understood that humans were valued not because of strength or dominance, but because of empathy, thoughtfulness, and the ability to act wisely. As he walked back to his quarters, Elliot reflected on everything he had learned. The projections had shown him possible futures, some filled with beauty and harmony, others with imbalance and loss. But he also realized that he could influence outcomes, guide growth, and create positive results. Responsibility was not about avoiding mistakes. It was about learning, understanding, and acting with care. Before sleeping, Elliot revisited the holographic images of the colony's past, the archive he had explored in Part 3. He touched one projection gently, feeling the pulse of energy and memory. He whispered to himself, "I will do my best. I will guide, care, and preserve. I will not let this trust go to waste." Outside the dome, the stars twinkled softly, and Elliot felt a quiet connection to the universe. He understood now that being human on Clyra Prime was about more than curiosity. It was about responsibility, empathy, and the ability to nurture life and knowledge. Humans had been chosen not by accident, but because they could see, understand, and act with thoughtfulness. As he drifted to sleep, Elliot imagined the colony thriving, the vines and creatures living in harmony, and knowledge preserved for future generations. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he felt ready. Tomorrow, he would begin to shape the living legacy of Clyra Prime, and he would do so with care, wisdom, and a deep respect for the trust placed in him. Responsibility was no longer frightening. It was a challenge, a privilege, and a calling. And Elliot Vance, once panicked by a simple ointment application, was ready to rise to it. The next morning, Elliot awoke with a sense of purpose that went beyond anything he had felt before. The twin suns of Clyra Prime rose slowly, bathing the biodome in soft, golden light. Today was not just another day of learning. Today was the day he would put everything he had learned into action. He would guide the colony, care for its life, and preserve its knowledge actively, thoughtfully, and responsibly. He met Lyra at the edge of the living archive, where the holographic projections floated gently in the air. "Elliot," she said, her eyes glowing faintly, "today you will begin the final stage. You will make choices that affect the colony's living future. You will nurture, guide, and ensure that knowledge and life continue together. Are you ready?" Elliot nodded, feeling both nervous and determined. He had spent days observing, caring, and guiding through projections. Now, he would act directly in the real world. He took a deep breath, recalling Lyra's words: guide without forcing, nurture without controlling. Their first task was simple in appearance but complex in effect. A cluster of glowing vines had begun to grow in a way that blocked light from reaching smaller plants. If left unchecked, the delicate ecosystem could weaken. Elliot studied the vines, feeling their subtle pulse through his hands. Slowly, he guided them to grow along a new path, gently redirecting them without cutting or forcing. To his amazement, the smaller plants below seemed to respond immediately. Their leaves stretched toward the light, and tiny creatures crawled and fluttered freely once more. Elliot smiled, feeling the harmony of action and consequence. His hands, once unsure and trembling when applying ointment, now moved with confidence and care. Lyra guided him to the next challenge. A group of young creatures was struggling to coordinate in their daily activities. The colony's energy flow, delicate and intricate, required their cooperation. Elliot observed quietly at first, noting patterns in movement, timing, and interaction. Then, using gentle guidance, he subtly encouraged cooperation. He shifted light sources, adjusted pathways, and created small cues that allowed the creatures to work together naturally. Within moments, the creatures responded, moving in harmony. Elliot's heart swelled. It was not his power or dominance that caused the change. It was observation, understanding, and thoughtful guidance. He felt the same pride humans often felt when solving difficult problems creatively. But here it was magnified by the living, breathing environment around him. The day continued with a series of similar tasks, each one teaching Elliot more about the delicate balance of Clyra Prime. He helped tiny winged beings learn new paths through glowing gardens, supported plants with fragile stems as they reached toward the sun, and guided older creatures to safely pass knowledge to younger generations. Each act was small, but each had ripple effects that reinforced the harmony of the colony. By midday, Elliot was exhausted but exhilarated. He paused near a reflecting pool, watching soft ripples distort the light of the twin suns. He realized that his actions were not only shaping the present but creating a living record for the future. The colony's history, its knowledge, and its life were intertwined. Every choice mattered. Lyra approached and spoke softly. Elliot, do you see now why humans are trusted with this responsibility? You do not need to be the strongest or the fastest. You do not rely on force. Your value lies in observation, understanding, empathy, and careful action. You guide, preserve, and create harmony. That is why you were chosen. Elliot felt a deep sense of gratitude. Humans had always prided themselves on creativity and ingenuity. But here on Clyra Prime, their unique ability to act responsibly without seeking control or dominance was exactly what mattered. He felt proud not only of himself but of his species. As the afternoon wore on, Elliot worked on one of the most delicate tasks yet. A rare plant species, essential for the colony's energy flow, was struggling to survive. Its roots were weak, and nearby energy currents threatened to dry the soil. Elliot carefully adjusted the surrounding vines, redistributed energy flows, and supported the plant's roots with gentle guidance. He felt the plant respond almost immediately, its glow growing stronger. The energy flow in the colony stabilized, and surrounding creatures moved with newfound ease. Elliot realized that preservation was not passive. It required attention, understanding, and careful, creative action. It was human ingenuity applied with empathy and patience. By evening, Elliot had guided entire sections of the colony, ensuring that plants, creatures, and energy flows were balanced and harmonious. He stepped back to observe the biodome as a whole. The light shimmered across glowing plants, creatures moved in coordinated rhythm, and the living archive pulsed softly, reflecting the harmony Elliot had helped create. Lyra joined him, smiling faintly. You have done well, Elliot. Today, you have not only preserved life and knowledge, but you have actively shaped the colony's future. You have created a legacy, not of power, but of care, understanding, and wisdom. The colony recognizes your efforts and trusts you. Elliot felt a surge of fulfillment. The journey from panicking over a simple ointment application to guiding the living future of an entire civilization had been overwhelming, but he had learned something profound. Responsibility was not punishment, it was an opportunity to make a meaningful difference. Humans, with their capacity to observe, understand, and act thoughtfully, could create change that others could not. As night fell on Clyra Prime, the twin moons rose, casting a soft glow over the biodome. Elliot walked through the glowing gardens, observing creatures settling into their resting areas and plants closing gently for the night. He felt a quiet connection to the colony, a bond strengthened by trust, care, and shared purpose. Back in his quarters, Elliot reflected on the lessons he had learned over the past days. Observation, care, and preservation were not enough alone. Guiding, nurturing, and creating harmony were essential. And humans, with their unique combination of empathy, thoughtfulness, and creativity, had the ability to achieve all of these. He thought of Lumina, Lyra, and the living archive. He realized that what had begun as a simple mistake seeing more than he intended had become an extraordinary opportunity. He had been entrusted with knowledge and life, and he had risen to the challenge. Elliot smiled, thinking of the future. The colony would continue to thrive, guided by the choices he had made and the understanding he had developed. Knowledge would be preserved, life would flourish, and humans would be remembered not for dominance, but for wisdom and care. As he drifted to sleep, Elliot felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced panic, uncertainty, and responsibility, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable. Humans were not perfect, but their ability to learn, adapt, and act thoughtfully made them extraordinary in ways that transcended strength or power. Outside the biodome, the stars twinkled, reflecting the gentle glow of the colony. Elliot closed his eyes and whispered softly, "I will continue to care. I will continue to guide. I will honor the trust given to me." For the first time since arriving on Clyra Prime, Elliot felt completely confident in his role. He had seen the fragility of life, the beauty of knowledge, and the importance of responsible action. And he had proven that humans, even in unfamiliar worlds, could rise to the challenge not through force, but through empathy, care, and wisdom. The colony settled into quiet harmony under the twin moons, and Elliot knew that the dawn of a new era had begun. Humans had earned their place, not as conquerors, but as guardians, and he, once panicked by a simple ointment application, had grown into a steward capable of shaping the living legacy of an entire civilization. The stars above Clyra Prime twinkled like a promise. Elliot understood now that the future depended not on strength or speed, but on awareness, responsibility, and thoughtful action. And humanity, with its capacity for care, creativity, and empathy, had been trusted to lead in a way that could change the cosmos for the better. Elliot smiled one last time before sleep claimed him, knowing that he had taken the final step in his journey. The responsibility he had once feared was now a privilege he cherished, and he was ready for whatever the living, vibrant world of Clyra Prime would ask of him next. The dawn was coming, bright and full of possibilities, and Elliot Vance, a human among aliens, had proven that responsibility, wisdom, and care could truly shape a new era. Not with violence, but with understanding, patience, and hope.